You're listening to the voice of the private sector. Welcome to Brian Bushlach's Business Briefing, only on FM News 101.
And broadcasting in two of America's greatest cities across Seattle on Talk Radio 570 KVI and Portland FM News 101 KXL. We welcome you this weekend as we anchor this show from our studios right across the street from the Space Needle and welcome you to the voice of the private sector. Got a great show on tap, big tax changes, and for a change, they're actually good for business owners. We'll talk to Michael Lortz from Geffen Mesher in just a moment. Also, might be time to reevaluate your relationship with your banker. We'll tell you why coming up in about 15 minutes. Also, next half hour, the biggest and best wine auction, at least one of them in America, the Classic Wines Auction in Portland, just a couple months away. We'll preview this major event in our next half hour. Can't wait for that coming up in mid-March. Lots to talk about as well. And for those of you in Portland, hour number 2 of the show this weekend, we'll talk about the Old School New Rules, a great book that's out bringing some of the old school techniques back to today's business. Great book. Much more on that straight ahead. First, though, this hour, let's kick it off talking about taxes. It's that time of year, at least on the personal side, when many of us are getting the taxes ready. But from a business perspective, some big changes at the end of 2015. And as I said off the top, this time, for business owners, they're positive. I was in Portland this past week, sat down with one of our experts, Michael Lortz, at Geffen Mesher. Well, some tax changes as we enter 2016, Michael. We talked last time about some of the permanent changes, but we also have some temporary changes, and these are also fairly friendly.
These are. In fact, one of these temporary changes is an extension and then a phase down of a provision that's very important to our larger business clients. And this is what we call bonus depreciation. So when companies purchase new property, can't be used, but say they're buying a bunch of additional equipment, furnishings, etc., the bonus depreciation allows them to write off half of that purchase in the very first year. This equipment might last many years, but they can write half of it off immediately. Well, this has been in the law for a while. It expired, so for 2015 it wasn't going to exist, but it's been extended retroactively for 2015. It's good at 50% through 2017, and then it starts to phase down. So it's going to be 40% in 2018, 30% in 2019, and then after that, it's gone. So use it while you can.
Do you think they'll change that? I mean, we get closer to that? I mean, that's going to be an interesting transition.
Well, I'm sure there will be lobbying efforts, there always are, to try to get that extended. You know, these provisions came into the law originally after 9/11. You know, there was a recession. We were trying to stimulate investment in the economy, wanted businesses to buy capital improvements. Some would argue that that's not needed anymore, but I'm sure the lobbyists would argue differently.
Tell us, beginning this year too, real property, I guess, doesn't have to be leased to qualify.
That's right. So in the past, qualified leasehold improvements have also qualified for this 50% bonus depreciation. But if there wasn't a lease involved, then it didn't help you. So for example, let's say I've got a restaurant or a retail store, and instead of leasing the building, I actually own the building. Well, I was able to benefit from some enhanced depreciation rules, but not this 50% bonus. This is now changed beginning in 2016. Now, even if I already own the building and I'm making these sorts of improvements, now I can also qualify for the 50% bonus.
Good to hear. Michael Lortz joining us from Geffen Mesher. And some other things that, as you would say, maybe kind of niche-y, but are helpful.
Absolutely. So one of the items that we see for certain industries are tax credits related to employment. That can be a significant item. So there's a particular credit called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. And the amount of the credit can vary. It can range between $2,400 all the way up to $9,600, depending on the situation. It's a credit that employers receive for hiring certain groups of people. Examples would be hiring folks that are on food stamps, that are on welfare, that are qualified or disabled veterans, ex-felons. So there's these various targeted groups, and if employers hire them and they follow the paperwork trail necessary, then they can qualify for these tax credits. So these credits have been expanded. There's also a new provision related to hiring folks that have been unemployed. So, as we know, there are still folks that have been unemployed for a long time, even with falling unemployment numbers. So, if somebody has been unemployed for 27 weeks or more, and they've been receiving unemployment compensation benefits during that time, and they're hired, now the employer can claim a tax credit for as much as $2,400 related to the hiring of those individuals. Now, one caveat, this is something you've got to be in front of. This is not something where you hire everybody and then at the end of the year you go to your tax accountant and say, hey, I hired these folks, so I get a tax credit, right? There are things that have to be done in advance of the hiring.
One other item, and I know it in Oregon particularly, this is always, very high on the radar when it comes to, energy projects and the tax credits for those projects.
That's right. And Brian, as you know, I've done a fair amount of work over the years in some of the renewable energy spaces. And one of the constant struggles in the industry, particularly for solar, has been, what about these energy tax credits that are incentivizing people to install and purchase solar panels? And wind has had a similar concern. So a number of the tax credits were set to expire in the very near future. Those credits have now all been extended. Now they're extended through different years, and they also have phase downs where they start to shrink. So for example, solar is going to remain at 30% for a while, but then it's going to start to shrink in terms of the qualifying percentage when calculating the credit. Same for wind, same for geothermal. There's another tax credit called the production tax credit that is similar to the credit that we normally use for solar. Wind tends to use the production tax credit, and just like the other credit, it's going to remain in place for a while, but then phase down and eventually go away.
It's interesting that they're doing that in an era where, we're trying to upgrade and push renewable energy, that they're phasing these tax credits out.
That's true, and if you follow the articles on this topic, there's really a divergence in the industry in terms of the folks that think these tax credits are a good thing versus a hurtful item. There are some folks in the solar industry, for example, that actually think having these tax credits is a negative because of what it does to the public perception of the industry. So whether or not the extension of these credits is a positive thing for the industry as a whole, I don't know. I can tell you that most of the folks I know are happy about this that are in the industry, but there are some that actually think it's a negative.
Okay, it's January. I may not see you again until April 16th. I know we'll probably talk, but it's getting to be busy season here at Geffen Mesher. I want to get your read on the mood of your clients. I know you talk to a lot of people at year end. January start to roll around. It's time to start thinking about individual taxes. What's the mood of the clients that you work with in terms of the economy in 2016?
Most of the clients I work with have had a great year in 2015, and they're expecting growth for 2016. And there's always the occasional exception, but most of them have found that their biggest challenges relate to finding good people or finding good deals. So in the real estate industry, a lot of our clients have been doing a lot of transactions, buying and selling. Finding the right property to buy is difficult. Trying to find the right property to develop is difficult, but that's what they're working on. And then for a lot of the professional firms I work with, 2015 was a year of a lot of growth, and they're looking at how can they sustain that growth.
Well, great advice, as always, from Michael Lortz at Geffen Mesher. We appreciate his time and his insight. And if you'd like to reach out to Michael, run a question past him, he is open to your emails, MLORTZ, mlortz at gmco.com, MLORTZ at gmco.com. That's Michael Lortz at Geffen Mesher. And hey, great to hear some positive things happening in terms of taxes, at least some certainty for a while when it comes to business and taxes. Okay, when we come back, our next segment, is it time to reevaluate your relationship with your banker? I know for some of you it might be. We'll sit down with Jim Stevens at Umpqua Bank to talk about that and fraud protection. That's up next as the voice of the private sector continues across Seattle on Talk Radio 570 KVI and in Portland on FM News 101 KXL.